Good morning, everyone. I hope that you're all feeling as fresh and lovely this morning as I am. What I want to share with you today is something that's called the communication model in NLP and coaching circles. NLP, for those of you who don't know, stands for neuro-linguistic programming. And I won't go into the fine detail about what that's all about right now. I'll save that for another time. But basically, this is a model or a kind of diagram, a way of understanding the world and how we make meaning from the world around us. And the reason I want to share with you this model or this diagram is because it really helps you to understand what's going on in your mind. And when you understand and how what's going on in your mind affects your behaviours, your actions, and how that has an impact on the external world around you as well. Because when you have that understanding, it gives you more power, more choice, and more control over what you do. And it makes it much easier to change your habits when you understand how it's kind of all working internally. So it's kind of like having a problem with a car. If there's a problem with a car, you don't know where that problem is, how you're going to fix it, you're not likely to get very far. When you identify a little bit about how the car works and which bit of the car has an issue, you're then able to work on that bit that has the issue and to fix it. Or you might pay someone else to do that for you. The point is, you need to have an awareness of where the problem is, where the issue is, so that you can work on fixing it. And so what this model does is it gives you a bit of that understanding of how you're relating to the world around you and how your behaviours, your actions and your habits, and particularly your drinking habits, fit into all of that. Now, this is a model that I share in Module 5 of the programme, but I thought it would be helpful to give you kind of a bit of a taster of it now, because it really does help in understanding what's going on for you. So I've got a copy of it here because I want to make sure I don't miss anything. Now, where's the best place for me to start? Okay, so first of all, just let me explain the language that I'm going to use. I'm going to be referring to the external territory. And what I mean when I refer to the external territory is basically the external world around me, or the external world around us. So everything that I can see out the window, everything that's around me now. If there were people coming and going, they'd be part of my external territory. So everything that's outside of you is what I mean by the external territory. I'm also going to be referring to your internal map. And by internal map, I mean what your mind is doing with all of that information that's coming in from the external territory. Now, we take information in from the external territory through our senses. So we see things, we hear things, we smell things, we taste things, we touch things. That's how the information from that external territory comes in. And we then do all sorts of stuff with that information as it's coming in. So let's imagine that I've got a kind of filter in front of me, kind of like a sieve or a colander. And all of this information is coming in through the external world. But before it gets to my kind of internal map, it gets filtered through this kind of filter or sieve, however you want to imagine it. And that filter is made up of all sorts of things. That filter is made up of my personal beliefs, my ethics, my values. It's made up of my culture. If I have a faith, it's made up of the faith or the beliefs that I have, the spiritual beliefs that I have. It's also made up of my kind of cultural conditioning, societal conditioning, media, TV, all of the kind of messages and cultural messages that I'm taking in all the time and have done ever since I was a young child. Let's see what else is on this list. Unique experiences form part of that filter. Peer relationships, the relationship I had with my parents when I was younger. All sorts of things help me to filter out all of the information that I don't want because it doesn't suit all my personal filters, and helps me to filter in all of the information that does suit my personal or internal map of the world. So there's the external world out there. Here are my filters. I'm filtering in the information that suits me. I'm filtering out the information that doesn't. And inside, internally, I'm creating a map of that external territory. And the important thing to be aware of is that that internal map is completely different to everyone else's. So if there were 2 or 3 of us sat in this same space right here, right now, in exactly the same external territory, we'd all be creating completely different internal maps. We'd all be taking in the same information, but we'd be all filtering out different bits and filtering in different bits. So the important thing to know is that that external territory out there, we can't do anything about. There'll be things in that external territory that are beyond your control. So it could be things like a family member, their behaviour is unhelpful to you or difficult or challenging. They're part of your external territory. You can't do anything about that. The only bit you can control, that you can change or have an impact on, is your internal map. It's how you process what's going on in that external territory. I'll give you a good example of this, and I think I give this example also in Module 5. Somebody I used to know was one of life's eternal victims. He believed that the world was against him. He believed that luck wasn't on his side. He was constantly on the receiving end of a barrage of bad luck and bad stuff happening to him. And this is what he believed about himself and about life. And one of his things in particular was he believed when he was driving that whenever he got to traffic lights, they were always red. And this was a particular belief he had. The lights were always red, no matter what. And it was really interesting because if I went out driving with him anywhere, and I did this a handful of times, sometimes the lights were red. Sometimes they were amber, sometimes they were green. It varied from journey to journey. But what he did was his external world, these traffic lights were part of his external world. He was seeing exactly the same stuff as I was seeing, but his filters were filtering in the red traffic lights and filtering out all of the green traffic lights. Because his internal map, his personal belief was that he only ever got red traffic lights. The traffic lights were always red for him. That was what he believed. He simply filtered out anything that didn't match that belief. So he only filtered in the red traffic lights, filtered out all the green traffic lights. It wasn't that he was lying to himself. It wasn't that he was stupid. It's just that this is the way our minds work. We filter in the stuff that we want. We filter out the stuff that we don't. And so we see the world in a way that suits our internal map. So just a quick recap, we've got the external world out there, we've got all our filters that are made up of all sorts of beliefs, cultural conditioning, peer influences, parental influences, spiritual or faith beliefs, all of those things make up our filters. We create our own internal map of the world around us, and we filter in the information that suits that internal map, and we filter out all of the information that doesn't. So within our internal map, we have 3 closely interrelated things going on. We have our internal thoughts. We have our feelings and emotions. And we also have closely linked our behaviours and actions. And those 3 things really influence one another. They all interact with one another. So if, for instance, my friend is thinking to himself, the red lights are always against me, you can imagine how he's feeling as he's driving and approaching a traffic light. He's feeling a sense of tension, he's feeling a sense of dread, he's feeling very negative and angry, because what happens when he does come across a red light and he filters that information in through his senses is he can then get justifiably angry, he can get disappointed, he can get depressed, because it's all confirming his negative belief about the world around him. So his thoughts and his feelings are both interlinked. And of course, they both have an impact on his behaviours and his actions. So the way he's behaving when he's sitting in the car, he might be shouting, he might be gesticulating, or he might be quite miserable and down and slumped and his shoulders forward and his chin down. But what his thoughts and feelings are doing internally is going to have an impact on his behaviours. And his behaviours then are kind of the outward expression of all of that back out into the external territory. Now, I've got a diagram here. You're not going to be able to see it very clearly, but I'm hoping it will explain some of that. So here's the external territory. I know this is all the wrong way around for you, but bear with me. So here's the external territory. All these little arrows are showing all the information from the external territory coming in through our senses. Then we've got this block here, which is our filters. This is our beliefs and everything that I've listed, filtering out the bits that don't suit us, filtering in the bits that do suit us. Then we've got internally, in our internal map, we've got our thinking, which is made up of images, sounds, and self-talk, which is the little voice that we hear in our heads. And that interrelates with our feelings, our emotions, and our physiology, how we're feeling and how our body might be reacting to how we're feeling. Those two are closely interlinked, and they're all on the internal part of us. So this is the external part, this is the internal part. What these two thoughts and feelings relate to then is how we behave, how we act. And the arrow coming across here means the behaviour and the actions we take kind of come back into the outside territory, into the external territory. So we have information coming in, we filter in what we want, we then have our internal thinking, we have our emotions and feelings, and then we act and behave in a way that kind of transmits all of that back out into the external territory. Now, you might be asking yourself, why am I telling you all this? I'm telling you this because when you understand that, when you understand how it works, you can then also understand that the external territory isn't something there's no point even wasting any energy dealing with the external territory. You can't change the external territory. You can't change other people. There are some situations you can't change. Let's say, I don't know, your boss at work has decided not to give you a pay rise. Or there are factors, there are situations going on in the external territory that are beyond your control. Now, you can waste an awful lot of energy trying to impact or influence the external territory. It's much, much easier to make changes to your internal map. It's much easier to change your thinking, to change your beliefs, to change your emotions, and to change your actions. All of the things that you can take control of. You have control over all the internal stuff. What you don't have control over is the external territory. And when you get that, when you really understand that, it can transform things for you. Because then you understand, oh, okay, I can't change the fact that my mates all want to go out and go drinking and get pissed on Friday evening. Obviously, I can't do anything about that. But what I can change is how I internally respond to that, how I act and behave about that, what actions I take, how I think, how I feel about that. Those are the bits I can change. Now, the program obviously gives you much more information about this and many more tools and techniques to help you change some of those things, change your thinking, change your behaviours and change your emotions. Because believe it or not, it's possible to change your emotions and to choose what emotion you want to feel in any given situation. So the program helps you to do that. But I just wanted to introduce this concept to you now because it's such a transformatory thing to know that actually instead of putting your energy out there into trying to change things that are beyond your control, what you can do is instead put your energy into your internal map. You can change your beliefs, you can change your actions and your behaviours, you can change your emotions, you can change your thinking. Those are the bit that you need to put your energy into, not the external territory. It might be helpful at this point to give you an example of how this relates to a drinking, not drinking situation. So I'll give you an example from my own history. When in my drinking days, I used to invariably, I won't say every time, but more often than not, when I was travelling, I used to get very anxious about flying. And so invariably on the flight, I would have a drink. And if not, I would be psychologically really looking forward to a drink at the end of the flight. And that looking forward to that, holding on to that thought kind of gave me a bit of peace and calmed me down during the flight because I had something to look forward to at the end of it. So my trigger on the flight, when I'm in a heightened state of anxiety, that external territory around me was the flight, was all the people around me, was the airport, was the aeroplane, was being up in all that external territory. I was filtering in all of the information through my senses that suited my internal map of that situation, which was that this is stressful, this is challenging, this is difficult, I'm going to be anxious. These were all my internal thoughts. My feelings would be high levels of anxiety and stress, even panic, even terror. Those feelings and those thoughts would then translate into my behaviour, which obviously I'd be very tense, my shoulders would be uptight, my jaw and chin would be set. I'd be doing a very good job of trying to appear normal and calm on the outside, but inwardly my physiology would be very tight and tense. And of course with that my breathing would get shallower and more difficult. So that's an example of how that works in a situation, a stressful situation, which was a trigger for me to drink. The actual trigger came when I was hearing the drinks trolley being prepared and approaching me up the aisle. So I would hear the clinking, I would hear other people being poured drinks, I would hear the sound of the trolley getting closer and closer, and that for me was a real trigger to drink. So there's a couple of things that there's a couple of techniques in the program that enabled me to change the impact that this trigger had on me. I basically disabled the trigger. Can't remember what module it is. I think it might be module 4, where you learn how to disable your triggers. So I disabled this trigger so that the sound and the approach of the trolley coming towards me in the plane was no longer a trigger to drink. And what I was also able to do using some of the techniques in the program was to change the way I thought about that external territory, to change the way I thought about the flight itself, to change the way I felt about the flight itself. And of course that had a knock-on effect in terms of my actions and behaviours. So now when I fly, I'm a lot more relaxed. I don't have the same actions, the same tightness, the same behaviours. I'm not breathing shallowly. I'm breathing perfectly normally and naturally. I'm much more relaxed. I'm reading, I'm conversing. I don't have the anxiety, the panic, the terror and the tension anymore. Because I've changed the bits of me that I had control over. I didn't have control over the airline. I couldn't say to the airline, can you not push a drinks trolley up the aisle for this flight, please, because it's making me anxious and it's making me want to drink. Of course, I couldn't do that. That's part of the external territory. There's nothing I can do to change that. There's no point wasting my energy on that. The drinks trolley is going to come up the aisle. What I can do is change my response to the drinks trolley, change my internal map of that external situation. So I hope giving you that example helped to explain it a bit. The key points to take away from this is that the external territory is much, much harder to change, if not impossible to change, compared to your internal map. Your internal map is much, much easier to change. So I changed my internal map in response to flying and the drinks trolley trigger, and now flying is a completely different ball game for me. So changing your internal map is possible, and it's possible using some of the techniques in the program. I'll look forward to catching up with you in the support forum, and in the meantime, let's go get sober together.